Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving straight into a chronological look at a paranormal investigation that went, well, horribly wrong. We're unpacking the incredibly chilling source accounts of Annie. She's a 25-year-old British journalist who traveled to London to shoot a documentary, only to encounter something she literally couldn't explain. So let's unravel this timeline together.
Now, I want you to really think about this for a second. Can logic and technology actually protect you from a deeply cursed history? You know, we live in an age where we rely so heavily on cameras, microphones, and just plain rational thought to protect us from the unknown. But what happens when you step into a space where those modern comforts hold absolutely no power? I want you to keep that question right in the back of your mind as we walk through today's timeline.
Okay, to really understand what happened to Annie, we first have to understand the location. She was visiting the famously luxurious, incredibly antique Langham Hotel in London. And specifically, she requested room 333. Now, the source material outlines a pretty grim backstory for this specific room. Years ago, a Victorian-era doctor and his wife were actually staying there for their honeymoon, but as you can probably guess, it didn't exactly end in romance. The doctor brutally murdered his wife inside that very room, and then he took his own life. The legend states that the doctor's spirit never actually left.
So let's look at the clash of two very different forces here. First up, Annie's mindset. She's completely 100% logical. Her entire career is built on hard evidence. She's got a proven track record of investigating and entirely debunking fake haunted locations, exposing them to the world. Her plan? Spend one single night in room 333, record the total lack of activity, debunk the myth, and just move on to her next case. Simple, right? But on the other side of the ring, we have the room's legend. This is a space defined by unexplained phenomena, a deadly history, and a supposedly very real supernatural presence. It's the classic battle of modern skepticism versus ancient folklore.
When Annie first arrives, the Langham Hotel feels totally normal. From the main entrance all the way to the check-in desk, it's all soft carpeted flooring, bustling energy, and these enormous, beautiful paintings. The receptionist even greets Annie with this massive, welcoming smile. But the very moment Annie confirms her booking for room 333, the receptionist's face instantly goes pale. Her hands literally just stop moving. When Annie asks if everything's okay, the receptionist forces this tight smile, says sorry ma'am, and hands her the key. And get this, instead of a standard modern electronic keycard, she's handed a heavy old-fashioned physical key. The bizarre reality of the third floor is already beginning to bleed into the modern world downstairs.
Let me tell you, that bustling hotel lobby quickly feels about a million miles away. As she steps out of the elevator onto the third floor, the corridors are entirely empty and just dead silent. Those vibrant paintings from the lobby, they're replaced here by faded antique portraits, illuminated only by these dim yellow wall lamps that cast really long, deep shadows right across the hallway. The carpet looks ancient, almost like it hasn't been cleaned in decades. And beneath it all, the wood floorboards groan and creak under every single step she takes towards room 333, sitting way down at the far end of the corridor.
When she finally reaches the dark, polished wood door of room 333, she grabs the heavy brass handle, and the source text makes a point to explicitly mention that the metal was unusually, uncomfortably cold. She turns the key, opens the door, and is greeted by absolute pitch-black darkness. So she sets her suitcase down in the hallway, turns on her phone's flashlight, and starts feeling along the wall for the light switch. The exact moment her hand flicks those lights on, bang! A huge noise echoes right behind her. She spins around, heart absolutely pounding, and it was just her suitcase. It had seemingly toppled over entirely on its own right outside the doorway. Now, it's a small scare, sure, but definitely a jarring welcome to the room.
But hey, remember, Annie is a professional. She is not going to let a falling suitcase deter her. She brings her luggage inside, takes off her coat, unzips her bags, and just relies on her system. She totally ignores the heavy Victorian decor, the massive king-size bed, the antique dressing table, and this really unsettling full-length mirror mounted on the wall directly facing the bed. Instead, she zeroes in entirely on her equipment. Up goes the tripod, the camera is mounted, and the microphone is connected. You see, her tech is her armor, and once that little red recording light starts blinking, she feels right back in control.
With her armor securely in place, Annie settles into a pretty mundane evening. She orders a sandwich to the room and eats it comfortably over on the corner sofa. As night falls, this deep November chill really starts seeping into the room, so she lights a small, comforting fire in the fireplace. Late into the night, she's just sitting there with her laptop, casually researching ghost sightings, completely absorbed in the internet.
The camera's rolling, the mic's hot, and honestly, she's so relaxed that she accidentally drifts off to sleep. And then she is jolted awake. A sharp knock echoes right through the room. Still half asleep and super confused, she just waits. Then the knock comes again, followed by a man's voice calling out through the heavy door, "Your room service, madam." Now think about that for a second. She already had her sandwich hours ago. She figures there has to be a mix-up. Maybe it's someone else's order. So she walks over to the door and looks through the peephole. And standing out there in the dim, yellow-lit corridor is a smartly dressed butler holding a tray covered by a large silver lid. Annie opens the door and politely tells the butler that, hey, she didn't order anything. But the butler simply replies that it is indeed her order. And as he says this, he reaches out and lifts the large silver lid. Resting right there on the plate is Annie's own severed head. The sheer psychological horror of this moment causes Annie to just let out a blood-curdling scream. She squeezes her eyes shut in pure terror. But when she opens them just a fraction of a second later, the butler's gone, the tray's gone, the corridor is completely empty and dead silent. Annie absolutely slams the door shut, locks it, and practically dives for her camera. She needs proof. She needs to rationalize what she just saw as some sick prank or weird hallucination. I mean, she had cross-checked all her devices during the setup, right? The camera was pointed right at the action. So why didn't the camera record anything? Well, her technological armor completely fails her. The video camera, which was expected to provide continuous visual recording of the room, reveals an SD card that is inexplicably completely corrupted, just gone. And the voice recorder? It was expected to pick up the loud knocking in the butler's voice, but it captured absolutely nothing of the entity. It only recorded the physical sounds of Annie opening the door and her own terrified screams. Her logic is just breaking down here. Her evidence is completely gone.
The clock strikes 1 a.m., and despite the fire still crackling away in the fireplace, the source text notes that the temperature in room 333 is absolutely plummeting. It's becoming unnaturally bone-chillingly cold. At this point, Annie is full-on panicking, completely unable to process what is actually happening. Desperately trying to ground herself, she rushes into the bathroom to just splash some cold water on her face.
She leans over the sink, washes her face, and looks up into the bathroom mirror. And there, standing directly behind her, is a literal nightmare. A man with a rotting, decaying face, exceptionally long, terrifying nails, and dressed in torn, ragged Victorian-era clothing. It's the doctor from the legend. And as she watches paralyzed in the mirror, his hands slowly reach out, preparing to wrap around her throat to choke her. Annie spins around instantly, but the bathroom behind her is completely empty.
Okay, Annie has officially lost all control. Her only instinct now is to run. She throws her things together, dashes for the dark wood door, and grabs the brass handle, but it won't budge. The door is somehow securely locked from the outside. She is totally trapped. And then the power fails. The lights in room 333 begin to violently flicker, and in the strobe of those failing lights, the entity appears again. But this time, he's closer. The source text describes him so vividly here. A man with a completely white body and piercing yellow eyes, stepping slowly, inevitably, right toward her.
Annie just begins to scream for her life. Out in the corridor, 2 or 3 hotel staff members actually hear her desperate, agonizing cries. They rush to room 333 and somehow force the door open. But what they find makes their blood run absolutely cold. There's no white-bodied ghost. There's no Victorian doctor. The room is totally empty, except for Annie. But Annie is standing in the bathroom, screaming wildly, violently smashing her own head over and over again into the shattered remains of the bathroom mirror. Glass is literally embedded in her face. She's fighting an invisible force that is taking complete physical control over her body. The staff tackle her, frantically pulling her away from the glass until she finally just faints from the sheer trauma.
When Annie finally regains consciousness, she's downstairs in the hotel's brightly lit medical room. Still completely terrified, she explains to the staff that the horrifying man with a rotting face had grabbed her by the head and was physically forcing her to smash it into the mirror, and that is exactly when a staff member delivers the final, chilling piece of context. They tell her she was attacked by the spirit of that Victorian doctor because he killed his wife the exact same way. The ghost wasn't just haunting her, he was actually using her to reenact his own gruesome, historical murder. Annie did physically recover from her injuries, but our source notes she will likely never truly recover from the psychological scars of room 333.
Which really brings us back to the core theme of today's explainer. When you strip away the corrupted SD cards, the failed microphones, and those completely logical mindsets, what happens when you are truly trapped in the dark with the ghosts of history? Think about that next time you book a hotel room.